It's very brightly colored and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while.
We want to be free to do what we want to do.
Muhammad Ali and Sonny Barker, the president of the Hells Angels.
This is 1095.
How are you, Matt?
I'm very well. Grandmaster Wolf or GM? Can I call you?
Please,
okay.
GM is good.
Awesome.
Yes.
How was your weekend and how's your beginning of your week been?
Oh, look, I fall in love with life every day that I wake up in the morning. It's fantastic, always. Thank you for asking. And yours?
Yeah, very nice. So I'm at the end of Monday, this is what I do for my kind of spare time. So I'm at the end of my business day. So hopefully your energy is gonna give me a bit of a wake up. We're about 7:30 in the evening here, but it's been a good weekend and a good start to the week. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. You're in Australia by the sounds of it.
I'm not.
No,
from my accent, you mean, which is all over the place. No, I left the UK 27 years ago, but I spent 10 years in Sydney. I spent about 8 years in Singapore, and now I'm in a little place called Pai, which is about 130 k's north of Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand. So, and I know you spoke to someone recently that I had coffee with the other week, actually, who was also out of Chiang Mai. So,
is that Rasmus?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So I'm in. Wow. So yeah, I'm in the same. Which was not how I came across you, actually, but I think the algorithms on YouTube, because I subscribed to your channel, threw up his videos. So we caught up for a coffee in Chiang Mai recently. So yeah,
he's a nice young man.
Yeah, he is, and I enjoyed listening to your conversation. So,
wonderful.
Cool.
What are we going to do?
Well, I've got some stuff. I mean, I before I get into the weeds, I suppose what would be great is to do a little introduction and allow you to do that. I know, having listened to your other podcast, that introduction in terms of the journey, that took you from, I think, the UK to Australia, and then, maybe just to give an intro of how you ended up in Tibet. That I know that in itself is almost a kind of book within a question, but yeah, a little bit about how you went to Tibet at a very young age and went into the monastic life, and then we can talk about some kind of topics around around the teachings, the learnings, and other stuff. So yeah.
Okay, nice. Is this it? Is this the podcast already?
It is. Yeah. I just thought we'd jump in. We're not live. We're not live, but it's it's a good question. I do hope I hit record. Yes, I did.
That's a great question. I have a bit of long-term, what's it called? Long COVID at the moment. So if I start
sorry to hear.
That's all right. I'm enjoying it.
Cool.
Where are we? Okay. Ooh. I'll give you some exclusive stuff that I haven't actually said in other podcasts as well. So in the beginning, won't go into the very beginning too much. It was quite an abusive, confusing upbringing for me as a child. Quite violent. There was no love in my life. I didn't even consider what love might have been until I was about 15 years old. So one thing led to another. I had to get away from home as much as possible. So after school, I would start going to the Police Boys Club and learning about martial arts and things. While I was there, I was talking to a friend of mine who he was my best friend, so I trusted him, and I started telling him what was going on at home. And at that time, as a very, very young man, I was so angry and so upset, I actually started digging a grave for my father. That's how bad it got.
Wow.
My friend's father, however, was a sergeant of the local police force, so he told his father about me, and his father picked me up with his son after school one day, and he gave me a nice talking to, and he introduced me to a Chinese kung fu teacher. This is back in 1972. So the kung fu teacher, basically, I went and talked to him. He talked to me. He called my parents and said, I think there's a lot of potential in your son. Would you mind if I took him to live with my family and we teach him some skills? And my parents said, yeah, take him, not a problem. So he literally took me from that moment. So I never went home. They didn't ask who he was. They just let him take me. So I went. He immediately, upon going to his place, he immediately handed me over to his father. Now, his father used to work for the Tong in China as a hitman, basically. And he got to a ripe old age where he had to leave. And of course, you don't leave people like that. But he was extraordinarily well respected man. So they let him go without killing him, but they took his face off with a jar of acid. They threw acid in his face. He lost his face. And he just had this little tiny hole that he could see through. And he became my teacher, and he was teaching me everything that he knew. After a very short period of time, he basically turned to me and he said, you are so broken on the inside. We can't continue. So he gave me a letter of introduction and put it in this little silver tube, and he sent me off to Tibet, where there was a Sherpa waiting for me. I was at the ripe old age of 14 at this point.
Wow.
And the Sherpa met me in Nepal at the airport, and a couple of weeks of walking, he dropped me off at a monastery, and that was it. I was there for 18 years.
Wow. And that was, so this is in the early 70s, like 70, 72, 73, 74, I think.
Yeah,
And
73, 74.
so
I should say at this point, Matt, when it
Yeah.
comes to timelines,
yeah,
I'm a moron these days.
cool.
so
No worries. I'm not far off
I'm
you. So-
okay.
I'm not far off you. The only reason I bring up the dates is because I'm in my head. I'm going right because the Dalai Lama was kind of ousted in what 59, I think.
57, 59.
Yeah, and then he ended up in Dharamsala. So that time, and so I traveled to India way after that, maybe 10, 15 years. But when I traveled to India 10, 15 years after that, so in the kind of early 90s, that was when there was, in the north of India, all the graffiti on rocks, not graffiti, but just spray paint, free Tibet, free Tibet, free Tibet. But so I imagine when you were there at that point was not a good time to be going there as a young, from Australia. You went there, did you, at that point?
Yes.
As a young lad from Australia, temples or no temples, monasteries or no monasteries, I can't imagine it was the most safest place to be as a young white boy from over the oceans. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little bit daunting. But my time in Australia, I actually grew up with, Chopper Reed.
Well, not personally, but actually, funny. A good friend of mine that is here in a few days in Australia. He's English but lives in Australia. He photographed him when he was still alive, and so so I'm only one degree away, maybe. So yeah, know him well in terms of his character and who he was. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he was part of our group, or I was a part
Wow.
of their group. So at that time, because of the way I was being brought up.
Yeah.
So we were quite tough. That wasn't nothing new to us.
Yeah.
Trouble of that nature. I was quite good. Maybe I was naive. I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried. I was excited all the time. Bruce Lee had been out long enough for me to want to be Bruce Lee. I was just excited. I was happy-go-lucky. I was just glad to be away from home. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. It was hard, it was very hard. Yeah. But I loved that too. I'm not the same person that went in there, obviously. Sure. Yeah.
So when you ended up in Tibet as a young lad, did you then go straight into a monastery, into monastic life and ordain, or were you just kind of around the monks, or was it the kung fu, or was it a mixture of all? What was that journey like in the early days of experience?
When we first got there, my my Sherpa took me to the front gate, two big iron gates, very old iron gates, and he dropped me off there, and he said, "This is the place you're headed for. Just wait there, and someone will eventually let you in." And 2 weeks later, they let me in. Oh, dear. But that was cool. It's a way of life. So I'm sitting out the front, and each day there would be little kids would just rock. People just melt out of the rocks in Tibet. You'll go walking down the road. You'll be sitting on the edge of a cliff. There's no one for millions of miles in any direction, and you'll hear a twig click behind you, and you look behind you, and there'll be 10 people there, and you think, where did they come from? But they're selling you. Little kids. They'll pick up a leaf and they'll fill it with berries and anything they can find, and they'll come and sell it to you for a couple of rupees. So that's what was feeding me for the 2 weeks outside the front gate of the monastery. After a few weeks, someone finally came and opened the gates, and they just let me in. They obviously had been watching me. They obviously knew that I was coming. And that was that. So I was there for maybe 6 weeks, 2 months, and then it was time to have my head shaved and get renamed. So they shaved my head, they renamed me, and I became an ordained monk at 14.
Wow.
And that's pretty much all I've done, really. It's not that exciting.
Spent a lot of time looking in.
Looking in, yeah. The funny thing is, when you start looking in, you end up going out. There's a back door to in. Let's not go into that.
I was about to say, let's talk more about that. So, but
no, let's do it. Sure, let's do it.
Well, yeah, go for it. I mean, I suppose. Well, actually, before let me ask a question that actually prompted the reason I dropped you an email. Actually, so forgetting Rasmus, that was accidentally later. But about 3 months ago, I was listening to another podcast you did. I forget the name of the chap, I think in America, who has a pretty big channel interviewing a number of different kind of spiritual people. And
Ferrari?
Yeah, quite possibly. The show was about reincarnation, death and reincarnation. It was, I think you'd spoken to him before, and you were talking at the beginning. There was a couple of things in there that really struck me as just made sense. And I think the first one was your analogy of existence as a wave. In fact, my audience wouldn't have heard this, so maybe this is a good segue to let you just explain. I think, if I paraphrase, I think you were explaining just, form, matter and form, basically our existence as, not separate. And you described it as a wave on the ocean, but then many waves, and then the connectivity between the two. I'm terribly paraphrasing, but maybe as a segue into what I want to talk about, if you could explain that much better than I just did, because I'm repeating something from you on another podcast, that would be great.
Oh, that hurts. Sorry.
You got a great laugh. I love it.
Oh, I got an ab cramp after.
Hopefully it's helping the long COVID.
Oh, no, it's good. It keeps my six pack. Yeah. I've got a horrible fever going right now, actually. It's really fun. It's interesting. All right, then, the wave thing. OMG. Give me a sec. How far back do you want to go? Usually with this one, we've got to go back about 20 billion years. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds perfect.
It's just around the corner, not a problem. Shit. Give me a sec. I have to take this from Tibetan and put it into English in my head.
Cool.
Okay. We got to do a little bit of Einstein thought experiments. Let's go back 20 billion years. If you can imagine 20 billion years ago, before there was any matter, before there was any dust, before there was anything at all, just space. So you've got space there. Now, space is a thing. You can punch a hole in space. It's a black hole. You can't do that if it was nothing. So you can punch a hole in space. After much, much, much scientific investigation, it's a scientific knowing now that the universe is conscious and the universe is one big living entity and we are part thereof, basically making you and I two hairs on the back of a dog. So you've got this space thing that is conscious and aware, and it's going in all directions. No matter yet. There wouldn't be a center because there would have to be a periphery in space to measure a center from. And there is no periphery, so you're not measuring a center. There's no center. So it's just mind everywhere in every direction. Now, imagine if you're floating there as part of that pure mind, but you don't have a body, no thoughts, no brain, no matter, no dust, nothing at all, just mind. How would you know you were there? You wouldn't. You have to be able to see something to imply that you're there looking at it. So you wouldn't know you were there. So this mind has been there for who knows how long, and it didn't even know it was there. Keeping in mind that 20 billion years compared to eternity means that this thing isn't even a fetus yet. Compared to eternity, 20 billion years is nothing at all. So it's a very, very, very young thing. Now, as also we know, any substance, so space is made of substance, any substance, when it gets thick and dense and heavy enough, will reach critical mass and it will start to light up. So that would have happened somewhere out there. It would have started to light up. And then the rest of the universal mind would have seen that. Suddenly you've got self-awareness. If it could speak, which it didn't, if it could speak, it would have said something like, I am. What am I? I don't know. I'm invisible. Conundrum. So from that, it needs to know itself. It's only just realized it's there. So now what's the next thing? It's got to do some exploring. What am I? Shit. So it covers itself in matter. That's no different to throwing a bucket of paint over Casper the Ghost. You throw the paint over the ghost, now you can see what it is, where it is, what it's doing, what it looks like, what its skills are, what its characteristics are. Oh my God, and now you can investigate the ghost. So you've got a universal life going in every direction limitlessly, and now it's covered itself in dust. So now it can see itself, and it looks like you and me and trees and planets and galaxies and black holes and other dimensions. This is what it looks like. It's a bloody big thing. So now consider a sponge, and that sponge represents you, a sea sponge. And consider that the ocean represents that universal mind. So the sea, the mind, creates the sponge. All the elements that make up the sponge comes out of that ocean. The ocean is in the sponge, saturating it, and the sponge is in the ocean. Same thing. You are in the mind and the mind is in you. Your body is that part of that matter that life is looking at itself through. So the meaning of life is frantically exploring itself through you, through me, through trees and worms and aliens and anything else that's out there. It's looking at itself through those. And if you imagine that each form out there, you could represent it with a wave on the ocean. You have the one ocean constantly creating waves, one after the other. They come and go, but you can't say that they've been born and died. They are just forms that are coming and going and bubbling on the surface of the ocean. And we are forms that are bubbling on the surface of the mind that is a universal mind. And that's our connectivity. The mind is in everything, and you are part of it. And there are specific exercises to give you that vision, to show your brain that you are part of this one great living entity. Once you've done that, feelings of loneliness and disconnection and fragmentation from the all ceases to exist within you, and you just start to live as one. At that point, it's very, very hard to kill an ant. You wouldn't believe how difficult it is. I'm going to have a little drink of coffee.
Go for it. Cool. Well, you haven't. I'm still with you. That's a good. That's a good sign. And I want to dive deeper into some of this stuff. And so the the individuality is somewhat of the illusion, I suppose you could say.
Oh, yeah.
So
Definitely.
if we jump from that to talk about reincarnation, because this is something, in fact, a question I once asked a monk, which was the best answer I'd ever got, but I still think about it quite regularly. I asked him, what is the connection between, a last life and this life, or the two lives of an individual, if there is no individual? And he kind of explained it in, not really a riddle, but he explained, if you light a candle and that candle's about to go out, and you use that candle to light another candle, that is the connection, which I thought was clever, because actually there is, those two candles are two independent objects, but there is an intrinsic connection between the two that makes them something of the same. But it still didn't answer it for me. That's the problem.
It took a third party to make the connection, though, you see. That's
well, this is, so my, yeah, I mean, I suppose what is the connection? I mean, and happy to go into because I want to ask also about, the kind of process of death and rebirth, but what is that connection, that karma, that creates the new imprint, if you want to call it that? Because if there is just one, and these two things are from one and therefore the same, then what is the connection between the two as such?
Well, the delusion is the two. There is no separate, so there's nothing to reconnect. It's already all one as it is. So there is no connection. It's the connection is the same as, oh gosh, how is the rain connected to the ocean? It is. How is the snow in the South Pole connected to the water that you're drinking from your tap? It's all connected. It's just one body. There's no separation. So if you start looking for connection, you're looking for something that is not only irrelevant, but it doesn't exist. It's looking for a problem that's not there. There's nothing to connect. It's already connected. It's like a wave. How is a wave on the ocean connected to the preceding wave and the proceeding wave? How are they connected? They're part of the same animal.
I suppose,
I
but I could, if I had to kind of use that side of my brain, I could explain it in some sort of molecular fashion, right? I could kind of, and maybe that's the wrong way to look at it, but that would be the logic side of me explaining that, because that concept of an ocean and waves, it makes perfect sense to me as an analogy, but I can explain the connection between, say, a single wave and the ocean based on, say, molecular structure, which, is not what I'm looking for as an answer, but...
All right. Let me come another way for you.
Okay, cool.
Give me a sec here. That mind that is in all things that we've just looked at, it can't come and go because it's everywhere already. Okay, here we go. Here's a better way of looking at it. You are seeing the body as the individual, and that's not the case. If you wake up as an empty glove each day and let life put you on, that's pretty much the case of being alive. You wake up each morning, life puts you on, and it does stuff with you. When life takes its hand out of you, you fall to bits and go back to dust. So there's this stuff that goes into matter, and matter is alive. When this stuff leaves the matter turns back to dust. It's an animating force. That's what you are. When you sit back far enough in your head and you watch your thoughts, you are that mind that is in all things. Now, when you train yourself not to faint and remain conscious on your deathbed at the moment of death, you'll watch your brain close down, you'll watch your thoughts close down, you'll watch your heart stop, you'll watch your liver and your kidneys closing down, and you'll watch the whole death process. And then you will see a light at the end of the tunnel. Now that light isn't God, it's not heaven, it's your new mother's vagina, basically. And when you go through that light, the first thing you're going to see is a nurse. And the second thing you're going to see is your mum as the nurse pulls you out and puts you on your mother's belly. So that thing that just came from the previous glove and has just gone into the next glove, that's your connection. There's no connection. It's you moving through different forms.
Okay.
It's no different to get out of one car, get into another, get out of one car, get into another. You're trying to connect yourself with the same person that got into the previous car, and it's you. It's always been you. Doesn't matter how many cars come and go in your life. Doesn't matter how many gloves you wear out in your life. It's the same you that has worn those things out.
What about that makes sense. I like that, and the car analogy is a good one. Actually, that's a good. What about the notion of coming back in different form? You know, whether it is, I mean, within this realm, let's say, without getting too kind of, so just coming back as a different type of animal versus a person, and what is the motivator? Maybe the wrong word, but what is the energy to create that outcome? What is the force that creates that outcome?
Well, life doesn't end, so inevitably it has to keep having different forms. It has to keep having different. It just has to have different forms. Matter can only hold itself together. Its characteristics are it can only be held together for a short period of time, maybe 80 to 100 years at best, and then it starts to fall apart. All matter, whether you're talking about a house or some mortar or bricks or whatever things, matter falls apart eventually. That's its nature. This is why you'll never understand spirituality by using your thoughts, because your thoughts are made of matter, and their only function is to gather and recycle data for you. That's what they do. I forgot your question.
Well, I'll put it into. Let me put it into more simple terms, I suppose. But yeah, coming back as a person or coming back as a dog.
Gotcha. When you train yourself and you crystallize the spirit mind that you are in there, and you regain your dominance over your human existence, and you train your ego to be put aside and don't come up until you ask it to. Once you've mastered that, you remember your life, you remember your death, you remember your birth, you go into your new life with a complete memory of how you got into this one, and it's no longer broken up. At that point, you are called a Rinpoche, someone who is self-mastered to the point where they no longer fall unconscious. At that point, you stop identifying with the ego and the matter that you inhabit, and you start to re-identify with the animating force that's in all things. So if you're the kind of person that does nothing in your life in regards to bettering yourself or self-mastery, you will faint and fall unconscious out of horror on your deathbed. That's what normally happens. At that point, you've relinquished control to the universe completely, and it's up to the universe what it does to you next. In which case, if you spent your entire life as a human being just fucking and thinking of your cock and nothing else, you have shaped your spirit to be better suited to that of a rabbit. So when you are born again, you'll come back as a rabbit. That is your fault. That is your choice. It is not a punishment. It's you. You see, you wasted your life as a human being doing things that a rabbit can do. So what's the point in giving you another human body? So you get what you asked for.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you've mastered yourself and you don't have to go through all of that silliness anymore, and you are in control of your own journey, then when it comes time to die, you have choices. You can go towards that light and come back and do it again in order to pass your experience on to other people and alleviate their misery and their confusion of life. Or you can refuse to go to the light but still let go of your body, and you can hover in this realm as a ghost. Well, ghost is the wrong word, spirit. And ghost is something completely different to spirit. That's your second option, in which case you can help people Usually people that are suffering around the area of death, you can be a comfort to show people that there are other things that you can do in life. There is something in you that does go on after the body has died. That's enough for anyone to have a better life. And there's one more option where you can not go through the light, not go back to the body, but you can enter into the astral realm where you become a part of the creative nature of life. It's whereby, for instance, hypothetically, I'll make something up. Einstein might be sitting on the toilet having a poo, and his brain has been working on an E equals MC squared problem for 5 years, and you just happen to waft through those coordinates where his head is at that particular time, and you drop off the answer for him, and he has an epiphany, and that epiphany would be E equals MC squared, and it would be your creative input, your creative encouragement would have pushed him just into that area, and that changed the world. And this is how you can help people from the astral realm. You become an active staff member of what's called the Akashic Records. And you can...
That's fascinating. I've not heard this kind of notion before, but you talk about them almost like choices, but presumably they're predetermined based on the way you live, or are they choices as you kind of transcend through this life to wherever is next?
Oh, absolutely. But you have to, this is the whole thing with Tibet. In Tibet, you spend your whole life preparing for death. That's what your life is. What does that mean? When you've left this life, there's this you've actually left your apprenticeship and you are going into the big world of real life. That's what death is. So in this life, you train yourself not to be a dickhead, not to be an asshole, not to be led down rabbit hole after rabbit hole because of delusions and illusions. Don't be stupid enough to follow a belief system when you're surrounded in facts and truth. Master yourself, master the matter, understand and know what you are and your place in this life, and then you can get back on the same page as life itself, which is unfold and know what you are. That's what it is. And you have choices. Once you have mastered that, you have earned yourself the right to make choices of that nature. If you're an absolute freaking asshole and your life, 80% of your life is just creating misery for others and collateral damage, you're not going to be given any of those rights. You're not going to have the right to be self-mastered because you're just going to do damage. There's no one out there taking notes on all of these things, like Father Christmas and all of that. That's not happening. But life knows. You see, the mind that inhabits you right now and everything else, let's say the mind that is animating the universe now, let's go back, let's say 150 years, the universal mind was animating a whole other bunch of forms, other people, other aliens, other animals that were around 150 years ago. It was in that. The same mind that's in you now, the same mind that's in me. So the mind that's in you now has been around for countless billions of years. It's been in countless trillions of forms that it has lived through and experienced itself through, and it retains all of that knowing. Otherwise, it's not learning about itself. So it's retaining the knowing. Now, when you learn to separate from the ego and you start to engage life purely from that original mind that you are born as a baby, you have access to all that knowing. And it can be dangerous if you are not a very well balanced, rounded off little piece, a little drop of that eternal mind. So you have to train it a little bit at a time, So you train yourself. If you haven't done that, if you've just lived as a low life, it's 50-50 what's going to happen next. You've got no idea what's going to happen next because you've done nothing about it and you've put nothing into it and you haven't taken the responsibility for your little portion of life. So it'll be start again for you, that little portion. If you've self-mastered and you use your life wisely, then you have choices and you have options after death. And that's a fact. These aren't beliefs. These are things that we scientifically do. We die on a regular basis. We close down the brain, we stop the heart, and we go out there and we see what it's like. Otherwise, you're just reading books and believing other people's crap that is based usually on theory. If you're really truly on the path of truth, theory and belief is not going to serve you well.
So I was going to ask you a question about religious structure, just which came into my head when you're talking, purely because everything you're saying makes complete sense to me. So, but it's interesting how the religious structure gives people I suppose, some sort of framework to, and when I say religious structure, actually, I'm talking initially about Tibetan Buddhism, which is what we're talking about. But my question is, that is just one way. I mean, ultimately it's about the individual and the awareness, presumably, and how life is lived, right? So that may well be a good structure to provide some sort of catalyst. But presumably it also doesn't matter. It's kind of, regardless of the religious structure, the individual, depending on where they're at and how they've been born, can kind of make their way through in that way of wisdom, essentially, without necessarily certain kind of religious structure, if my question makes sense.
Ooh, religion. I'm very reluctant to talk about religion.
Cool. Well,
religion has nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do with spirituality. It has everything to do with connectivity with other people. It's a social necessity.
yeah.
A church has nothing to do with religion, by the way, at all. A football club is a church. It's where a bunch of like-minded people get together and enjoy conversing about their life and their beliefs and their, anyway, that kind of stuff. I don't know where to go with religion. It won't be around in 100 years. It's almost knocked on the head now. Very few of this generation has gone down that particular rabbit hole. But if you don't have, if I start talking about religion, it's going to be derogatory to many people, and I don't want to do that. I
Cool.
don't want to.
Yeah, no worries. Let me, it's good then. Let me ask some clarifying questions then, because I only ask about it because I suppose my only experience, I mean, I was christened as a kid in England, as everyone was back in the 70s, right? Never went to church. Got interested in the Thai forest tradition because there were monks under Ajahn Chah in the northeast of Thailand in the 70s. So I visited Wat Pa Pong, Wat Pa Nanacha. I ended up kind of, now that is called a religion though. So I suppose from a definition point of view, I was using the word actually to talk about the structure of Tibetan Buddhism, which I know less about. But your point is very valid. And I see there's value in those religious structures in terms of what I've seen in Thai forest Buddhism and the Ajahn Chah lineage, which just happens to be where I'd had some. And I'm assuming there probably is, certainly in the Tibetan structure, but maybe the problem is that word because it envelops so much more than just those disciplines, if you want to call it that, and those individual, because actually in some areas of Christianity, there will be people that go off and I've forgotten what the word is, become a hermit, go and discover themselves from an inward perspective, which is kind of like,
They've become mystics. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, maybe the future is not to have any of those structures, but then the hope is that the wisdom still kind of, evolves within individuals in different ways, through different interactions and through being on your own also,
Yes. There's a problem.
Yeah, okay.
You see. Let me give you a short for instance, of what I mean by that. How are we going for time, buddy? Are we good for time?
Yeah, we're okay. If you're okay, yeah. 15,
I'm
20
fine.
minutes. I'll probably finish
Yeah.
at 8:30 my time. It's been a long day, but so we're about 40 minutes in. So, yeah.
Wunderbar. What were we going to talk about?
We can, if you want, we can just knock it on the head, the religion part, and I'll ask something completely different.
No, you just asked me something very good about
Well,
religion.
I kind of went on a bit and didn't structure the question well. But what I was talking about I was referring to religion when, you know, with Buddhism particularly, and different types of Buddhism, and the structure that ultimately has created for many individuals that have gone on to, as you have as a good example actually. So for me, there are positives in that religious structure, but yeah, maybe I suppose my question was, you know, is the answer, because I agree with you, I can get quite negative if I talk broadly about religion, but you know, is the answer that those things kind of dissolve and the individuals make the wise choices, yeah, without those kind of structures, which ultimately get politicized and used, and you know, have so many other elements to them that are kind of non-spiritual. So
Yeah. Okay, here we go. You ready?
yep.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm just gonna. Have you seen one of these before?
No, what is that?
It's a little door.
I know what it plugs into. Yeah, it plugs into one of those old batteries that when I was a kid I used to put on my tongue, because that was probably, everyone said that it gives you a bit of a shock, and for some reason I thought that was a clever idea.
Nice. This is a buzzer that goes on a door of a shop or on the back of a truck when it's reversing. You know,
Okay. Yeah.
We bought a heap of these for a workshop that we recently did, and only this particular model seems to work. So that's what happens when you do that. But what we've also found out with these things, if you're focusing correctly and you can put your mind into theta, you can do that. Off the track.
That was pretty interesting. Okay.
It is. Buy one. You will be amazed.
God, that is off track, but I've got a bunch of questions. But go on. Let me let you go for a minute. So I'm interested to understand your theory of what's happened.
This is why it's hard to answer these questions.
Yeah.
The day you were born, pristine, clean, beautiful baby, pristine, clean, state-of-the-art mind, fully enlightened. The mind that is in all things, the mind that was there before matter. That's what the baby is full of. No thoughts, no opinions, no problems, no judgments, no hatred, no bias. Just a beautiful, pristine, clean, divine little mind in a brand spanking new state-of-the-art baby's body. Then our parents and the television and the radio and the people next door and cousins and uncles and friends and siblings all start putting their beliefs and their opinions and their judgments into this little baby. Their labels, how this should be, how that should be. You shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. This is how you should be. That's horrible. Don't do that. You'll be a bastard. By the time you're 10 years old, you've got a few 100 million of other people's crap, other people's beliefs, may or may not be wrong, other people's judgments, they're always wrong, other people's opinions, that usually replaces truth. And that's what gets shoved into this little baby, and that accumulates and becomes an ego. Is it any wonder no one knows who the hell they are in this world? Because your ego, which you identify with as being you, and it is not, is made up of a bunch of other people's beliefs, etc. So this is a dead thing. And you can take any one of those thoughts that's been put into that baby and break it in half and look at it. There's nothing in it. It doesn't know you're there looking at it. So you got a head full of these shit turds of other people's knowing, and they're controlling your life. There's 8 billion of these on the planet right now. We've all got one. The original beautiful mind full of wisdom that was born in that baby is long forgotten in the background. So now we've got 8 billion people walking around with these dead shit things called an ego. These egos invented your law system. Is it any wonder the law system isn't fair? These things invented education. Is it any wonder your education doesn't really prepare you for real life? These things invented religion. You see, and this is why I can't answer. I find it difficult to answer, because when I'm not thinking, when I'm not talking to you or anyone else, I don't think. I put my thoughts aside, and at that point there's no religion, there's no hatred, there's no confusion, there's no racism, there's no anger. It's just beautiful, wonderful joy and nothing else. And you live your life from your pure knowing. And in that knowing, there is no religion. That's something that matter made up. That's something that the monkey put together. It has nothing to do with reality. If you're sitting back if you're a religious person and you train yourself to sit back in your mind and watch your thoughts being religious, are you a religious person at that point? No, you're not. Your thoughts are being religious. You are something in there watching it happen. When you're sitting in there watching your thoughts, what are you in there watching those thoughts? You take the thoughts away. I've taken away your name, your identity. I've taken everything away, and yet you are still there as an entity, but you are not your thoughts. And when you stop your thoughts, religion does not make sense. It is purely, has everything to do with matter. So religion has nothing to do with reality. Religion has nothing to do with spirituality. And religion has got nothing to do with you mastering spirit and moving on in a fully controlled, mastered life after your death. It will do none of that for you. I'm not putting down religion. I'm just saying that the religion, all of these things in our world that doesn't make sense, including society, was invented by this thing that we call an ego, and none of it works. We've had society for, God, I don't know how long, let's say 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years, and we're still murdering each other and raping each other and killing each other and stealing from each other, so that's not working. Religion's been trying to do its shit to us for a couple of 1,000 years, and people are still murdering each other and raping each other and stealing. So that didn't work. You take 6 of the most evil humans on this planet, put them in the same room together, show them how to rise above their thought process and their ego, and keep them in that space of mind for 2 minutes. And for 2 minutes, you would have 6 enlightened human beings in that room, full of nothing but love. Put their programs back in them, you've got 6 serial killers back in the room. So what's the answer? Learn to rise above your ego, and the world's problems are over. That's how simple it is. Compare that to the crap that is all over YouTube right now.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah.
And that's what I learned in Tibet.
As you were talking there, I was just I was thinking how, I mean, if only if I'd have been taught meditation at school and not French, I'd have gone a lot further.
Wow. Oh my God. So you can do German, French, or Enlightenment. They're your choices. Even with those choices, most people would do German.
I will to your point, yeah, all the crap on YouTube, and hopefully I can ask this question without, I don't want to open up any more that you might feel is negative, but it is a question I'd like to ask. I mean, when you look at society today, like you say, we should be in a different place, because there is collectively so much capacity, I would say, if that makes sense, just to be a lot wiser. I mean, where do you see us as at? Is it just pessimistic? Is it just TikTok-y? And, or do you think we're kind of hopefully going to somehow there'll be a kind of tipping point where we, as a society, there is enough people at some level where we're all pulled forward,
The wonderful, beautiful life that is in all things isn't going anywhere, and it is always going to be there forever. It has already been there forever, and it's full of joy. Waves come and go, planets come and go, forms come and go. You can get rid of this planet. This planet could explode tomorrow, and it won't make one iota of difference to the world, to the universe. While you have been sitting there today talking to me for the last hour, or whatever it has been, about 150,000 skin cells have died and fallen off your body. Has that made any difference to you, their God? No. You're still sitting there. And the birth and the life and the death of every individual cell on your body was necessary for you to flourish as mat. So it's irrelevant whether we come or go. It's irrelevant whether we become extinct or not. Life goes on, and life is what it's all about. It's not about us at all. We have the privilege of having life get to know itself through us. That's your purpose. It's the meaning of life. And if you're happy with that, you will never ever have a sad day for the rest of your life. You'll just watch life exploring itself through you. Like being a toy for a baby that you just love with every inch of your being. I forgot what you asked, but that was
it doesn't matter.
Cool.
It's good words. It's good words, and I'm going to. It's nearly time for my nightcap, and I'm going to say thank you. It's been good to meet and have a chat after a long day, and I appreciate you giving your time. And one more thing I will just ask in terms of, I live in a place actually where there's a Kung Fu school and a Kung Fu master here who I interviewed a while ago. I imagine your knowledge of Kung Fu and the stuff you've done, I would find links on your website. And if people want to find, we haven't really talked about that, but is there an area where people can learn more about the Kung Fu side of your life? Is that still up to date? Is that stuff you do now, or is it, yeah?
I still train every day of my life.
Yeah.
But I don't write anything about it. Honestly, the paranormal stuff, the PK stuff that I do, that is just, I'm so upset that I even started doing that, because people are more interested in that. My objective in life is to put total self-healing skills in everybody's first aid kit.
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessary to have to go to psychiatrists and psychologists and doctors for most of the things that ail us. You can deal with you could have schizophrenia, and I can show you exercises that will allow you to deal with your schizophrenia, live a happy life, and you will never have to take substances again. So this is my aim in life, is to put people's health and wealth of spiritually, mentally, emotionally back into their own hands. So that people today have no choice but to be fodder for many, many, many con men and scammers, and it's disgusting. So this is what I want to do. I want to put the skills of self-mastery into every home in the world, so that every child, by the time you leave high school, deep meditation and realizations is something you've been doing for 5 years already.
Yeah.
That's my aim. So I don't talk about the Kung Fu. I don't talk about, because all of my Chi work that I do came from the Kung Fu in China. It didn't come from Tibet.
Okay.
Everything in Tibet is mind and spirit, which is the same thing. Everything in China is about magic and Chi and that kind of thing. So I don't. If you want to, I would love to have more talks with you. If you want to do that,
sure.
I would love to do that, because I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thoroughly.
Cool. Glad. So have I. And I know you said you were kind of enjoying having long COVID, but thanks for joining while you have, because it can't be that pleasant. But I was, I'm very appreciative of you giving your time. So.
Anytime, my friend. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Awesome.
I can tell you now, though, my reception elf, she's going to get in touch with you, because she's going to ask you, is this your particular format that you've got going, platform here? Is this...
Oh, I don't think you right now can see what I'm seeing, but it's you probably. I'm not sure how you see it on your side, but on my side, which is what gets published, I have a frame for me and a frame